Real Talkers, what's shaking? It's Thursday, April 28th. Ryan Jesperson here with you from our home studio in Edmonton. It's good to be back in the same room.
Welcome back.
As our intrepid technical producer, John Hicks. How you doing?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I missed you, boss. It was lonely in here.
Well, hey, man, it was a great time out in Jasper a couple of days. I want to show you a couple of highlights in just a little bit. Out there to deliver a keynote at the Community Leaders Camp, which was really cool. Community leaders like elected officials, city managers, chiefs of staff, strategists. It was a small and intimate group, like 30 or 40 people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from across Western Canada. People up from Michigan, which was really cool. Got to pick their brains on what's working in their communities and talk about some really neat things. And then, of course, 2 episodes of Real Talk live from the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, which I wasn't going to say a thing. Because there wasn't nearly enough wood around me to knock on, and I was surrounded by forest to paint a picture, but I didn't want to risk anything. But a huge credit to you and to the team.
Oh, come on.
No, to the events team at the JPL. You coordinated with them ahead of time. These are the things that the hosts don't think about. But you guys had it so nailed down. Their team did such a great job. They had virtually a vault-like sound studio for us in there, and everything went seamlessly. I didn't want to say everything's going great at the time because
you didn't want to call it
when
during.
you do that. That's when it all collapses. But a job well done. And
well,
here
thank you very much.
Here you are at home. Managing what I would imagine in my life would be such a stressful circumstance. Can I say you locked your phone?
Okay, go ahead.
You locked your phone across the hall in a room across the hall from our studio in our working space.
Yeah, we have a back office here.
So you were without your phone until I got back from Jasper. I could unlock that door for you. How did you manage that?
And my keys. And I didn't want to bug you like you're driving back from Jasper. Andrew Walker, who of course hosts The Hedge, we launched this week. He as well is super stressed, and so I just went home. I got my wife to pick me up.
Your wife had to come pick you up.
But it's funny because we had that conversation with the social media experts yesterday, Beverly and Amy, and they were talking about getting off Twitter when you feel like it's hindering you.
Yeah.
Refining your news feed. And, man, I felt pretty good last night being out of the loop. Of course, I was still on, Slack and stuff talking to you.
Yeah. Sometimes it's nice. It happens
little break.
Every once in a while, it'll happen where your phone battery gets down to like 3%. 2%, and then it'll die on you. And for the first 10 minutes, you're realizing you go to check your email, or you go to send somebody a money transfer, or you go to do something. You're like, and then you settle into this this is the way it used to be.
Yeah, I watched the Jays in 30. I caught up on some sports. I did some prep, and everything was quiet. I was like, this is nice.
So you took your break from screen time by putting yourself in frnt of a bigger screen, but watching baseball.
Well,
so there you
go. I hung out with my wife. We had dinner, and she was like, "Oh, don't you have work to do?" I'm like, "My phone's not here."
Yeah, what can I do?
Relax.
I don't know. Well, it's nice. You get some quality time, my man.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to be back. We've got a great show in store coming up in just a few minutes. We're going to talk Alberta provincial politics. I want to talk to you about COVID today. The numbers are they're concerning, and I think that Real Talk includes Real Talk about whether or not people are even paying attention to COVID numbers anymore. And then we've got a guest coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. If you're watching or listening to us live, if you're listening to the podcast or catching us on YouTube later, you'll catch it in about a half hour from now, 30 minutes from where we're at right now. A remarkable graduate from the University of Alberta's Faculty of Law, Anita Cardinal-Stewart. She's the recipient of the Justice Rosalie Silberman Abella Prize, and it's awarded by the Royal Society of Canada to 23 graduating law students across the country, one from each school. And we reached out to Anita. It's an amazing story. She was pretty excited to be joining us on the show, and here's why, because she's talking about this as her Cookham journey. She's a grandmother, and I'm going to let her tell her story. She obviously is the one that needs to deliver this story, but she has her first kid at 17. She wrote in her high school yearbook that she wanted to have 2 careers. There's 2 careers she wanted to pursue, and one of them was a lawyer. But she kind of felt like maybe life was putting her in a position where that might be out of reach. And she's just graduated with her Juris Doctor. She's a doctor of laws.
Amazing.
And just a remarkable career. It's not just the story of, she made it to law school. She graduated from law school. She's a fierce advocate, in particular on issues impacting and affecting Indigenous people in Canada. She's acted as an advocate for people that have been victims of forced sterilization. She's been doing a lot of work relating to the 60s Scoop. I can't wait to talk to her. That's coming up in about 30 minutes' time. Plus details on a whole bunch of things that we have cooking that we're excited to tell you about. But first, let me remind you, this show happens because we have the support of sponsors like Bitcoin Well. We're talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the blockchain. What a cool roundtable we had a couple of weeks ago, trying to make sense and understand how all of that fits into the future of Canada's economy and maybe job opportunities. How do we draw investment here? How does it all fit together? If you're trying to make sense of it and you want to talk to somebody that knows, I recommend Benny at Bitcoin Well. You'll find him under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Yeah, let's get to the COVID numbers really quick. This is a former colleague of mine and still a great friend, Courtney Theriault, does an amazing job for City News. Courtney, through the course of COVID, has been kind of a go-to. He's a must-follow on Twitter at CSpot tweet, and he was pointing out yesterday, here's some of the numbers, our home province of Alberta, and we're seeing numbers across the country, but Alberta's averaging 9 COVID deaths per day over the past week. Ages of deaths were between 32 and 103. Hospitalizations are up by 94. These are the numbers as of yesterday, at more than 1,200 with 47 people in ICU. Now, that's way less than at the height of these spikes. Remember when there were like 250, 280, 300 people in ICUs, but still, these numbers are high. And Courtney pointing out that Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, saying by comparison, American data prior to COVID found that there was 1 death per day on average due to influenza. So he says using that range in Alberta, we'd see 2 or 3 deaths a day. That means that COVID is currently killing 3 to 4 times more people at that rate right now. 3 to 4 times more people than influenza on average in Alberta right now. 9 deaths a day. And I couldn't help but notice that a city councillor in our home city of Edmonton, Andrew Knack, kind of poured it out yesterday. As a matter of fact, he tweeted this almost at midnight last night. So it's something that's, I don't know if you read too much into this. I always have thoughts to tweet at like 3 a.m. and I say, well,
I didn't have my phone, so
yeah,
this is new for me.
Yeah, well, check this out. But I don't blame the counselor. So it's almost midnight. I don't know if he's tossing and turning, but it's at least on his heart and his head. He says, I'm struggling with the weekly reporting of COVID deaths. He says last week another 62 people, he's talking about Alberta, another 62 people lost their lives to this virus. That's more than the total number of people we lose due to the regular flu in an entire year. He says, I don't feel ready to accept that yet. He says that's such a large number of people, and it feels like we've just accepted that reality. Instead of understanding if there's anything we can do to help reduce the number of people we lose every day, I don't understand why we haven't had that conversation as a society. He wonders, is it because of the vast majority of people who die are seniors? Like, just for a second, just to say this, to break away from the Councillor Knack's thread, when you hear that the COVID deaths have ranged in age from 32 to 103, most people won't say it out loud, but there's probably some folks that would go, oh, 103. I mean, 100, yeah, that's, they were probably quite vulnerable, right? 103. I mean, the wind blows too, so 103, right? You remember the Alberta's premier got himself in hot water about a year ago saying, I'd like to, he says, I point out the average age of deaths due to COVID is 83, which is higher than the higher than the average. And people are going, well, why does that matter? It's still a human being, it's still a family experiencing
100%.
loss. But Knack's making a point here. Like, is it because the vast majority of people who die are seniors? Does it change? Does that shape or influence public opinion on COVID? He says it sounds terrible to say, and he's right, but yet it feels like we don't value the lives of seniors the same way we do with those who are younger. I agree with him. He says that's a much bigger issue that I think we still need to deal with as well. He says, so my serious question is how do each of you manage this new reality? Does it bother you that we still don't fully understand what living with COVID will actually look like? Should I just get over it and accept a greater number of deaths of seniors? Counselor wraps up by saying, are there studies showing that, the additional deaths are offset by lower numbers of other deaths? I just find it odd, he says, how quickly we moved from treating this virus seriously to pretending like it doesn't exist. And I'm truly interested in the feedback of those who have fewer concerns. So that's interesting. We are too. If you want to share your thoughts with us, maybe this is a trash talk for you. I don't know. talk@ryanjesperson.com is where you can send us an email. And, of course, Trash Talk will go tomorrow, presented by Local Environmental. Brad says, I think it's just because the government doesn't care. They just want to move on. He says, I can't believe we're just accepting these deaths and just moving on. Meantime, Tracy says, that's 62 families, 62 deaths last week. That's 62 families who lost a loved one unnecessarily, says Tracy. Let us know where you're at on that. I'd be curious to know. In just a second, we're going to talk to a guy that's been in politics for a long time. But before we do, quickly, I want to mention something to you. We've been excited about this for a while. You know that we launched, in memory of the founding member of our editorial board, who just absolutely bravely and valiantly fought cancer, a horrific cancer diagnosis for almost 5 years. She beat that prognosis. She stared it in the eye and said, I will not let this take me down. And Julie Rohr was a force of nature, and you know that. If you watch this show, if you paid attention on social media, just an incredible human being. Before her passing, we were very proud to work with Julie to establish the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship, which will make available $5,000, an annual payment awarded annually to a different post-secondary student who lost a parent to cancer. And Julie provided the directives of how our editorial board will select that recipient, and this scholarship will be funded by our Real Talk Golf Classic. And the inaugural Golf Classic goes June 23rd. That's Thursday, June 23rd of this year. A shotgun start at 2:15 p.m. at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. I want to let you know, as of yesterday, registration is open for this tournament. So if you go to ryanjesperson.com, you just go to our website. It's easy to find. You click on the events link, and you go to the Real Talk Golf Classic, and there you'll find it. The sign-up details, if you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in sponsoring a hole, you want to be our title sponsor, you click. It takes you to registration. It's nice and easy, and if you have any questions, you just send them to us, golf@ryanjesperson.com. The Real Talk Golf Classic registration is now open at ryanjesperson.com under the events link. That's Thursday, June 23rd at 2:15 p.m. We're excited to have an opportunity to hang out with many of you there to celebrate Julie's legacy and, of course, to play what is consistently ranked as one of Alberta's top golf courses. That's the Ranch Golf and Country Club. You know, it's been named on some lists in Canada's top 20 public courses.
This is the course I hear about all the time, and I haven't been, so I'm excited to see it for the first time.
The biggest thing about the Ranch that people will talk about is that great players still find it challenging. Great players find it's a beautiful course. It's well maintained. It plays well.
Sure.
And party animals are welcome. And there aren't a lot of golf courses where scratch players enjoy their time and party animals enjoy their time.
Now I know why you booked it.
It's usually one or the other. Vitor Marciano has been Brian Jean's unofficial spokesperson for a while now. He's got a 20-year track record in federal and Alberta politics. As a matter of fact, Vitor served as the national policy chair for the federal Conservatives, and he was that party's chief political trainer as well. So he's Brian Jean's unofficial spokesperson, and Vitor and I have known each other a long time, making his Real Talk debut today. It's nice to see your face, my man. How have you been?
I am doing well. I actually think I've been on once before.
When were you on before? You were on with Janice Irwin. What am I talking about?
We had an argument about healthcare.
And I think that what am I talking? Of course you were on with Janice, and we called it the meet in the middle roundtable, didn't we? That's right.
There was a lot of space there where we could agree on things.
Yeah,
and it was interesting discussion.
Yeah, it was. Well, welcome back, Vitor. You've back in 2010. I mean, it's hard to believe this is like 12 years ago already. But at that time, Wild Rose Alliance leader Danielle Smith had asked you to become the Wild Rose's first executive director, right? And so you served ultimately then as her press secretary. You were Brian Jean's senior advisor. You worked on the 2015 election campaign for the Wild Rose, and of course, you were also involved in a lot of the prep work that created the UCP, and you worked on Brian Jean's campaign for the UCP leadership. So you've had your hands in the pot a lot when it comes to conservative politics in Alberta over the last 15 years.
I've had either the privilege or the misfortune of being sort of at the center of an awful lot of really interesting politics in Alberta for the last about a dozen years. Yeah,
we've got you. You can probably see your font on camera for people watching on YouTube. We have Brian Jean's spokesperson. We have spokesperson in quotes. I saw you quoted in a news article the other day. I don't remember the outlet. And one of my friends sent it to me and said, since when do MLAs have spokespersons? What's the deal here? What's with the structure?
I, I mean, I'm doing this as a volunteer. I'm doing this because Brian's a friend. I've been, advising him as a volunteer sort of for years now. We talk about stuff. We co-write some things. He comes up with an idea, sends me a draft. I do some refining. We bounce it back and forth. We do a lot of political planning. It's been one of those things. So, it's, for lack of a better term, I mean, actually, it happens all the time. People in politics have their guys. And, I remember people being described as Jim Prentice's spokesperson before Jim got officially involved in the PC leadership race. There were people who were spokespersons for Jason Kenney before he did anything official. Just seemed like the right way to describe it.
Yeah, I know that Albertans, it doesn't matter. I don't think how Albertans would align themselves politically, whether somebody might describe themselves as apolitical or an ardent or strident conservative or sort of more of a I think that there's a lot of people in Alberta that would describe themselves as progressives, but they kind of don't know where that fits. Right? Do you think that's fair? Like, people would still say, well, I kind of am a progressive conservative, or I'm the Alberta Party, or I'm considering voting for the NDP, or I'm absolutely voting for the NDP. How do you assess the landscape right now with regards to the 4.5 million people that call it home? What are you seeing?
So slightly more people in Alberta describe themselves as center right than describe themselves as center left. But if you were to take sort of the exact center, huge numbers of people describe themselves as pretty close to the exact center. But then you also have to consider it within the context of these broader definitions nationally and internationally. Alberta might be the most conservative province in Canada, but we disapproved of Donald Trump at a rate that was similar to New York State, California, and Vermont. So in the United States, we would have been, one of the most liberal states. It's the scales do not move easily across different countries and across different systems. And when you read things in politics that come from other places, you've got to think about the fact that, right in Texas does not mean the same thing as right in Alberta.
Yeah.
And the center in Alberta is pretty significantly left in most places in the United States. And the right is pretty significantly center and left in most places.
It's always interesting to see how people try to pin others down on the spectrum. I saw one of the Premier's issues managers just yesterday ripping the Premier's former communications director, Blaise Bomer, who came on this show last week. And the Premier's issues manager, Brian Bateson, says, yeah, Blaise, whatever. He says, I'm not sure we're too concerned about your assessment of how we're governing, considering you were on a left-wing podcast the other day. And number one, I thought it's pretty great that the Premier's office is tuning into Real Talk. And fellas, I appreciate that. A good morning to all of you. But number two, I thought a left-wing podcast, I'm not so sure about that. Vitor today. We've got Jean Charest tomorrow. We also talked to David Shepard earlier this week. We just talk to people, Vitor. We pick people's brains. And I hope that more people can recognize a value in that.
And there is value in that. And it represents the diversity of this province. Honest to goodness, the Premier's people should be focusing on communicating what the government is doing and the government's plans rather than picking fights with their enemies. I think that's actually one of the reasons why they're in so much trouble, is because they've not understood how to do this politics properly. I mean, that once you get elected, you're the government for all Albertans, and you can elect and you can govern from a center-right perspective. You can govern from the right towards the center. But the campaign's over. Stop picking fights about left and center and progressive and conservative. Just govern and bring your voters along with you. You'll do much better.
I know that people are going to, and people will expect a candid interview with you, which is great. I can't even, there's nothing funny about what's been going on with the previous leadership review, but as far as everybody can tell, it's happening behind closed doors and in the shadows, but this RCMP investigation continues. I keep hearing from people who shoot me little notes to let them know that either the police have reached out to them or that they have spoken with the police. And so you've still got that ongoing. And then potentially you've got a fresh leadership race coming up, potentially, depending on what happens, what the announcement looks like May 18th with Jason Kenney's leadership review. So how do you fit into all this? Like what? There's got to be a lot of noise right now, and here you are. Some might say, and no offense, Vitor, but the fox is in the hen house now.
Well, I mean, I'm aware of all of these things. I've been interviewed by the RCMP. I have some sense of the 2 or 3 different criminal investigations that are happening. It's a sort of Damocles that hangs over Alberta politics right now, because we don't know when the Mounties and the Ontario prosecutor will report on whatever happened. They've told us they're going to report. They've told the media they're going to report at some point, one way or another. I suspect it's getting close to the end, because just in mid-February they interviewed the premier, and so by the time you get up to the top levels, you're probably finishing off things. They say it's an extremely complicated investigation, and I believe that is the case, because I believe that they probably hit a whole bunch of cell phone companies with search warrants and Google and other places with search warrants. I used to believe that a small amount of crooked things had happened. Over time, people in the media have convinced me that a large amount of crooked things happened. Every now and then somebody in the media would tell me something and I'd say, that's just not true. I was there. If that had happened, I would have known. And then they say, go ask.
What's an example? What's something you feel comfortable telling us that wouldn't get you sued?
I was told at one point by somebody in the media that all of the pins from the 2017 leadership race had been handed to a U.S. call center that had been contracted by the party. And I told this reporter that's not true. If we had hired an American call center, I would have known about it. And by we, I mean the party, and that didn't happen. And the reporter said, you're wrong, and go ask around. And so I picked up the phone and called the person who was in charge of the LEOC, the Leadership Election Organizing Committee subcommittee that hired vendors, and said, what's this story about this American call center having all our pins? And that person said, oh, you've heard about that, have you? Shocked.
Wow.
I mean, what the heck?
So so what's the vibe right now in there, Vitor? If there's we talked to Leela here yesterday, who I know you're familiar with, Leela, former Wild Rose MLA, of course, and I was asking her about her colleague, another United Conservative MLA, Peter Guthrie, who's sort of joined the chorus of people speaking out against Premier Kenney. I don't know if you say Brian Jean is your boss, but whatever, but your pal, let me say, ran in the Fort McMurray by-election, to refresh people's memories, last month on the premise that he's coming in to unseat the leader. I thought, were you surprised that the Premier allowed, that he greenlit Brian Jean's nomination? I was surprised he allowed it.
I was even more surprised than that, because in many ways the Premier was involved in setting up the first domino that led to all of that. The Premier could have pushed hard to not allow Layla Goodridge to run federally, and instead he went out of his way to encourage it, which literally opened up a vacancy in Brian Jean's home riding. It was sort of like they were daring Brian to do it. I'm thinking they misread the situation. They thought, well, we'll dare Brian to do it. Brian won't do it. And then we'll say, shut up, you're a coward. Because that's how they play things. They like to be tough and rugged and aggressive.
I know.
And instead they opened up the opportunity, and Brian said, well, now I have to do it. And then I think Team Kenney thought they would beat him in the nomination, and they were telling everybody they were beating him in the nomination. I sat at a conference at a panel next to Alan Hallman, who told an entire room that his team was going to beat Brian Jean in the nomination because Brian Jean couldn't organize, and Brian won that handily, and then Brian won the by-election handily.
That's what a lot of people are saying right now. I was out for drinks with a buddy the other day, and he said this is a political strategist. He's working on a winning campaign at the provincial level, and he said Brian Jean can't organize. Can he?
I don't know. I mean, Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche has the second smallest population of any riding in Alberta, and it has the third largest number of UCP members. So you tell me.
Yeah. So what's the vibe right now? This party, everyone's saying, Premier's saying, you got to keep the party united, right? He's that's his campaign to remind people. His chief of staff stepped away from her role at the legislature to run his. It feels like I caught myself from saying re-election campaign. It's not that. It's he's trying to maintain his support as leader.
Campaign.
It's a survival campaign, exactly. And his message has been basically, I might not be perfect, but I'm better than the alternative.
It's really weird. It's vote for me I'm the only one that can keep this party united while he fosters and fuels division.
Yeah.
It's very strange. If you think about it in terms of, let's say that your significant other was threatening to leave your relationship and you didn't want that to happen, you would talk about, I'll be better, I'll change. These are things that I can do to hold it together. Jason Kenney is like, vote for me. I'm the only one that can hold this thing together. And if you vote for me, you'll get more of the same and a tougher attitude from me. I'll be, I'll pick up the stick and demand even more loyalty and even, I'll be more repressive. I've been too tolerant of dissent. And it's sort of like, no, you haven't been sufficiently capable of listening to your own caucus, which, by the way, might explain why you're having a tough time connecting with Albertans as a whole. It would explain why this government's polling numbers have trended down from the day they were elected. COVID made it worse. And basically 23 out of the last 24 publicly released polls show that this government's going down to a significant defeat if something serious isn't done.
So let me ask you this. People will say, well, Brian Jean had a crack at this before, right? The former federal MP has been leader of Alberta's official opposition. He has led a party before into an election. People will say, well, Jason,
7 days.
What's that?
7 days.
7 days.
He was literally the leader of the Wild Rose Party for 7 days.
Okay.
When Jim Prentice, out of fear, called an early election.
Yeah. Okay. So is that your premise, or is that your argument? Is that he just didn't have enough time to put together a proper campaign, or they were kind of running into it, flying by the seat of their pants?
Yeah. We had enough of a campaign plan to be real. I think we actually surprised everybody by how real we were. Remember, Wild Rose picked up seats during that election.
Yeah.
We went into an environment where the media refused to believe the Wild Rose was doing as well as it was doing, and framed the election as Jim Prentice versus Rachel Notley. And then the media used their megaphone to reinforce over and over and over again the Jim Prentice message, the Alan Hallman message, that he was winning 52 seats. And what happened all across Alberta was that a bunch of people said, well, he may be winning 52 seats, but he isn't winning this one. And a lot of people who don't normally vote NDP, who would never have considered voting NDP, voted NDP to stop the PCs. Brian Jean described it as an accidental NDP government, and people misunderstand what he means by that. The voters weren't voting to create a majority NDP government, but they were voting to make sure that they kicked the PCs in the tender parts. That's what they were doing. And Wild Rose, frankly, we couldn't get our share of the media. I mean, literally, when Brian Jean said we're at risk of electing an accidental NDP majority government, it got next to no press.
Yeah, but Vitor, isn't that like, just to ask you a straight question, like if a leader can't get the attention of the media, whose fault is that?
No, actually, no, it's more complicated than that. One, over time, we have less and less media.
Yeah.
Two, if the media decide that there's a horse race, they will, and they framed a horse race, they will follow the horse race. And the media had been embarrassed by the 2012 election, where they had said that Wild Rose was going to win, Wild Rose was going to win, Wild Rose was going to win, and then it didn't win. So they were like, whatever Wild Rose looks like it's doing, we're going to be skeptical about it. And ultimately became that way. But I will point out that post that election, Brian Jean took Wild Rose to number one in the polls consistently through all of 2016 and all of 2017, led Jason Kenney in polling amongst general Albertans. There was one poll that I remember put out by Main Street, where they try to figure out who had the highest net positives in Alberta amongst all politicians and all celebrities. And Brian Jean was tied with Connor McDavid and Johnny Gaudreau for the highest net positive. That's in the summer of 2017. Brian hasn't actually had a chance to run a campaign against Rachel Notley. If you think about 2015, he was running a campaign against Jim Prentice. And he was doing it before the two parties were united. He grew the Wild Rose vote share. He grew the Wild Rose seat share. I think he's actually done pretty well as a politician.
Okay, so I have to make like assumption after assumption after assumption. So this is like a hypothetical piled on top of a hypothetical, but assuming, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but assuming that the Premier's leadership review is unflattering, or it blows up in his face, less than 50%, or less than like a more reasonable number.
When I need a survivable number.
You need a survivable number. You can't go 50% plus one and say, I've received the mandate, I need to lead. Like, no way. But let's assume that he resigns or that something happened, like just for the purpose of this question. And let's assume that Brian Jean seeks the leadership. Let's assume that Brian Jean wins the leadership. And let's assume that it's Jean that leads the United Conservative Party, assuming it's still united, into the next provincial election. Brian Jean, no doubt, can secure the support of some of the dissenting MLAs, certainly. Some of those that would qualify more as the right-wingers. I don't say it as disparagingly. Let me just get the question out. As social conservatives, so to speak, rural MLAs for sure. But a lot of people will think, well, Brian Jean's even more, quote-unquote, right-wing than Jason Kenney. He's even more conservative than Jason Kenney. Can Brian Jean win the cities? Because you're not going to become premier if you can't win the cities.
Yes. And ultimately, I think you're falling into the trap of thinking about right and left when you should be thinking about good governance, good structure, good policy, the ability to communicate policies about the issues that matter to Albertans.
Well, that'll be his biggest job, though, right?
Right. And it's relatively easy to do. Some of the things that Jason Kenney has done, lots of Albertans agree with in principle. They just don't like how Jason Kenney did it.
Sure.
Albertans believe we do need to update the curriculum. It's time to renew it. It's been a long time since we've done that. They don't like how Jason Kenney did it. Albertans believe we need to fix healthcare. They don't trust Jason Kenney to do it the right way. Albertans need to believe that we need to return to a system that's got some sense of fiscal sanity, because we can't say that, oh, an energy boom means that we don't have a problem, because we all know that there's going to be an energy bust at some point too. So much of this has to do with the style and the leadership approach of the government and how it communicates to Albertans, how it doesn't listen to Albertans. And there's so much space for a conciliatory leader, a leader who governs more in the Ralph Klein, Peter Lougheed style than a Jason Kenney bombastic, I'm going to pick fights with my enemies type leader that just loses the support of everybody who isn't, a hardcore true believer Jason Kenney fanboy.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating, though, Vitor, is it worked very well for him in his five-step plan. Kenny, I'm talking about, when he came back from Ottawa, his five-step plan to unite the parties, to win the leadership, to win the election, and that bombastic, combative approach worked extremely well. And when there's a playbook that's working well, you don't toss out the playbook, and now it's blowing up in his face.
But ultimately, this is the problem with Jason Kenney. He won the leadership in 2017. From that point on, everybody knew he was going to be premier. And he should have been planning to govern. And he should have been building his plans to govern. And instead, he planned to campaign. And so you get April of 2019, this government wins. And for the next 18 years to 24 months, it looks like a government on training wheels. It's holding panels to decide what to do policy-wise. Well, you had 2 years. You knew you were going to win. You could have built the plan for what you would do as you govern in the meantime. And then you could have built, more importantly, the plan on how you're going to communicate that to Albertans. And here's the funny part. You could have gone back to the 93 to 97 playbook and just used the same talking points as Jim Dinning and Stockwell Day. We're all in this together. These are not easy decisions. We'd like to work with our unions and with Albertans to solve problems that we all agree with are problems. Now, it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be painful, but we can all agree that this is a problem, and we'd like to sit down with the people who are going to be most impacted and find a way to make it as little pain as possible. That was available to the Kenney government, but they just never did that. They didn't plan to govern. They decided that they would govern by the seat of their pants. Frankly, Jason Kenney does everything by the seat of his pants. He's so confident in his ability to talk that he doesn't actually need to plan for what he's going to say tomorrow. I sometimes make the joke that Jason Kenney does press conferences sometimes to find out what Jason Kenney's going to say. because that's how we operate. That's not a good way to run a province. Boring government, predictable government, a leader who's maybe not as good a talker as Jason Kenney, but is a better planner and holds his caucus together, delegates authority to cabinet, sets 5 or 6 big policy ideas out there, and then uses the power of the premier to make sure that these things move forward. All of that is better. All of that is available with the next leader, be it Brian Jean or whoever.
Yeah.
And all of that puts the UCP in a better spot.
I had an interesting conversation with somebody yesterday. I was at this community leaders camp out in Jasper, and we were talking about the political dynamic in Alberta and whether or not it truly is a 2-party province or whether or not there's room for a 3rd or 4th or 5th party like we used to have. And we were debating the importance of charisma when it comes to a leader. And I'm interested to hear you address that. Let me ask you this in closing, because we're way over time, and I know you're busy, and we've got a guest in the bullpen ready to rock here right now. So I'm sure that you have some sort of polling, Vitor. It seems like everybody does with regards to where they're predicting how this leadership review is going to go. I've seen most people estimating between 40 to 60% support for the premier. What are your numbers telling you?
I personally believe the premier is going to end up around 43 to 46%.
Oof.
The voters are located in the wrong places to give him a survivable number. There are too many new voters. There is no crop of brand new people who got involved in conservative politics to save Jason Kenney. The brand new people who got involved in conservative politics to vote against Jason Kenney. He didn't sell enough memberships in Calgary. He doesn't have enough support, frankly, from his home riding. And ultimately, the 63% of voters who are in ridings where their names don't start with Edmonton or Calgary are going to decide this, and they're going to defeat Jason Kenney. UCP is going to have a leadership race. UCP is going to renew itself. UCP will win the next election next year, though I don't necessarily think it'll be a May election.
Okay. When do you think it will be?
October, November.
All right. Yeah,
it's a smarter time to have fixed election dates in the fall than in the spring.
Why is that?
Because it's really dumb to schedule an election 1 month after a budget in perpetuity. Just ask Jim Prentice. Well, you can't ask Jim Prentice, but you can ask the people around Jim Prentice.
Yeah.
Doing a budget and then immediately going into an election can go really badly.
Yeah. Always love talking politics with you, Vitor. We don't always agree on everything. Some things we do, but I've always appreciated your candor and your availability, and thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is Vitor Marciano, Brian Jean's unofficial spokesperson in quotes. He didn't
Quotations.
Mind it. You and I debated that before. I said, "Do you think I don't want
Didn't want him to take offense.
Don't want it to look cynical." But he let us know it's a volunteer position for now. I mean, he would be, hypothetically, if Brian Jean were to be the next leader of the party, I'm sure Vitor would be his chief of staff.
Yeah.
Right? So, or some form of senior advisor. Listen, our Get Real question of the week, it's presented by our research and strategy partners at Y Station. We wanted to give this one some time to marinate, so it's up there right now, ryanjesperson.com. You click on Connect, and then question of the week. We're asking you, the United Conservative Party's vote on Jason Kenney's leadership kicked off April 9th. Results expected on May 18th. We want to know how you think it's going to go. How will the premier do in the end? What will be the impact of the voting format changes, the mail-in ballot? What role will Brian Jean play? We just talked about it. What lessons will we take from all of this? You click on the link to respond. It takes 2-3 minutes to get through it. We appreciate everybody that does. And we'll review those results next week, of course, courtesy of our friends at Y Station. If you're listening on the podcast, you wouldn't have seen what just happened, but I tried to go full screen, Johnny, and click through the menus, and it just gave us a big white screen for TV switchers and directors would go, Jasperson, what are you doing right now? The survey available until 3 p.m. Mountain on Sunday, May 1st. That's this Sunday. He talked about, he mentioned, what was it, Brian Jean's polling along with Johnny Gaudreau and Connor McDavid.
Yeah, I like how he threw in the hockey reference.
That's all anybody wants to think about right now. It's all anybody's talking about right now. Gives me a real quick second to plug the amazing work that you've been doing, John, with Andrew Walker, host of The Hedge. It's Relay's newest show. You can check it out at thehedgepod.com. And a quick shout out to Walks. Yesterday he spoke with Jack Michaels, the play-by-play voice of the Edmonton Oilers. Good show. And today, coming up, you've got Fridge.
You're going to want to tune in.
Fridge, I think they'll call him. Fridge is refrigerator, William Perry, right? The Chicago Bears great. But Elliot Friedman on the show today.
Enthusiast.
Former beard enthusiast. Elliot's COVID beard was something to
incredible
behold. It was like you expected there to be like a family of sparrows in there, but he's back to clean shaven now, and Walks will have him on The Hedge. You can check out thehedgepod.com, or you can check it out anywhere you download your podcast. How are you enjoying the coffee in studio today, my man?
It's incredible.
You like it?
It's really, I don't want to compare coffees, but this is This is the best I've had since I've been here at Real Talk.
Okay. Well, that's a good endorsement. We're drinking coffee this month, courtesy of our official coffee sponsors at Yeg Coffee Club. And this month's feature coffee is from Kafa Coffee Company, open and roasting in the beautiful neighborhood of Garneau in Edmonton. You can find them on Instagram. I encourage you to follow them at Kafa Roaster and Studio. Here's the deal. Here's how it works with Yeg Coffee Club, and this is what we love so much about it, is we don't just get the same roast, the same beans, the same region every single month. We get different coffee selections, all of them local and small batch, and so you know that you're going to get excellence, right? At yegcoffeeclub.ca, you can sign up right now. You can subscribe. It's like $25 per subscription. Now, maybe your workplace blows through 4 or 10 or 20 pounds of coffee a month, depending on how many people are there, right? You can alter your subscription so it meets your needs. You go to yegcoffeeclub.ca, you click on subscribe today, and then you can learn more about what you receive. Not just the coffee beans either. Tasty local goodies like baked goods or tea or little chocolates or locally produced honey, and then tasting notes like this one here in my hand about the monthly coffee roaster. It's a great idea. Mother's Day is coming up in a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to want to make sure that you do something to maybe treat, I mean, if you're a mom, treat yourself. Treat the mom in your life. Treat the person that definitely needs to be understanding a little bit more about how appreciated they are. This is a great opportunity for you at yegcoffeeclub.ca. Also wanted to tell you about Jet Set Parking. If you're going to be at the airport, if you're going to be heading out, if you're going to be making your way outside of Edmonton and you want to be keeping a little money in your pocket while you park your car at EIA, we recommend Jet Set Parking at jetsetparking.com. The promo code REALTALK is going to get you parking for $7 a day. That's $7 a day at Jet Set Parking. And the promo code REALTALK at jetsetparking.com. We recommend it. It's nice and easy. There's a shuttle to the airport at jetsetparking.com. Finally, Park Power, promoting our hashtag at parkpower.ca. They power it, Real Talk RJ. And right now, an opportunity for you to save some money is what we want to have these opportunities for you to be able to keep a little extra dough in your pocket. You go to parkpower.ca and you can compare rates on electricity, natural gas, and internet. And, well, let me tell you this. For a lot of people, the cost of living is going up so much so that they're looking at every single way. They want to find ways that they can save $20 here, $50 there, $40 here, $70 a month with the promo code 2022-RealTalk, $70 off your first bill at parkpower.ca. When you're there, I mean, the promo code lets them know where you found out about it. But when you interact or talk to any of our sponsors, like we always mention at Dairy Queen, St. Albert Dodge, we'll talk to you about them later. It means a lot to us when you let them know that you heard about them on Real Talk. Well, our next guest, this is just an absolutely remarkable honor. Many years, I won't say many years ago, Anita's going to say, what do you mean by many years ago? But when she was a high school student, she wrote in her yearbook, right, Anita? You wrote in your yearbook, and I want to give you a proper introduction here before we officially start asking you questions. She wrote in her yearbook that she wanted to be a lawyer when she grew up, so to speak. But there were barriers and challenges that popped up in her way. And Anita Cardinal-Stewart stared those challenges in the eye and insisted that she would succeed. She's a proud member of the Woodland Cree First Nation situated on Treaty 8 territory. She's a newly graduated law student from the University of Alberta. And, I mean, there's a million reasons why she should be on this show. But the reason why we reached out for this week is because she's just been announced as the inaugural winner of the Justice Abella Award, which is awarded to just one student at law schools across the country. She's one of 23 across Canada. She's past president of the National Indigenous Law Students Association, and we're thrilled to welcome her. Anita Cardinal-Stewart, JD, Juris Doctor. How good does that feel to hear? Congratulations.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me to come on. I am still very blown away by this honor, and Yeah, looking back, I've had this couple weeks to reflect since I finished my last law paper on April 5th. And it took a while to sink in that I'm done law school. And then law school was not just the last 3 years. It almost seemed like to get to this point, it's taken 45 years. And I've worked incredibly hard, and I'm pretty overwhelmed. And yeah, it was my junior high yearbook, actually. I had a friend contact me on Instagram about a year and a half ago, and she said, I see you're into law. We had lost touch for many years. And she said, I thought you would find this very interesting. And so she sent me that screenshot of our junior high yearbook, where my ambition I had written under was to be an actress or a lawyer. And it just took me back to that time of like, I've always wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't forget about it. But what it is just the barriers became so overwhelming as I grew older and started to realize just what those barriers were. And it wasn't until, probably about 8 years ago where I finally started to like have hope again that it could happen for me.
What was it 8 years ago?
Well, maybe a little bit more that, well, I knew that I wanted to pursue law in some way, but I didn't even for a moment think that it could be as a lawyer. I had not met an Indigenous lawyer until I was in my mid-30s, right? So I had no legal role models in my life growing up ever. I mean, Indigenous people could not become lawyers until 1954. We couldn't even hire lawyers until then. So we have a lot of catching up to do, and representation matters. And I never had those role models growing up. So I still wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't think it could ever happen. So I saw that Grant MacEwan had a paralegal diploma program, and I had done already community college, and education was still very important to me. So I did pursue it in other ways. And then I moved our family from the north, and came to Edmonton and did the paralegal diploma program, found some amazing firms to work at. I've been at the same firm since 2016, Cooper Regal and Sherwood Park. And it's given me the opportunity to meet other Indigenous lawyers, to work on such incredible files that really go after justice. And I am excited to continue on with them as a lawyer and not a paralegal, even though that was an incredible learning time for me. And it was that time where I really started to meet people that inspired me to like say, okay, let's do this. I'm going to do this. And I did. I started finishing my undergrad while I was working still full time as a paralegal. And I would go to early morning classes, work all day, go to evening classes, and then, have a family as well. Right. So it was a lot of hard work.
It's incredible. I saw, what did you call it? You called it your Cookham Dream, I think you called it. Wasn't that right? Or Cookham Journey, I think you called it.
Yeah, Cookham Journey.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the work that you've done. And, being awarded this honor, the Justice Abella Prize from the Royal Society of Canada, is just one of the honors, certainly. But I described you as a fierce advocate for justice. You've worked heavy files representing victims of forced sterilization, and I know that there's a close connection for you there. You've advocated for people that were involved in, and what I mean by victimized by, and I know people don't prefer that phrase, by the way. Should we say survivors of the 60s Scoop? I mean, this stuff, this is like deep-seated motivation for you, I have to imagine.
Yeah, absolutely working on those files. For the forced sterilization, I had heard my mother my entire life always talk about, because there's only me and my brother, and to only have 2 children in the family, for Indigenous peoples, that's a little bit like unique. I mean, usually I have other aunts and uncles who have a lot more children. And so there was always only me and my brother, and my mother would always talk about wishing that she had had more children. She couldn't. She said, she would always say, back in those days, women didn't have a choice. It was up to the doctors. I didn't have a choice. So I had to get sterilized after I had your brother. So I've always heard this, and I always would hear the sadness in her voice. And I didn't understand until later in life then I was actually when I was doing my undergraduate, and I was in the sociology class, and we had watched this program about forced sterilization in Alberta and how that happened to Indigenous women and also to people with disabilities. And I just remember just the floor falling out underneath me as I was sitting there listening to this. And it just pierced my heart, because I was like, my God, that's my mother. Yeah. And she doesn't know. That conversation with her was incredibly hard, because she didn't know what was done to her was very wrong, was criminal.
Yeah.
And I went into my office that day, went seeing my boss, who is the partner. And I know I was so emotional. I was so angry, and he, calmed me down, and I just blurted it all out. I'm like, is there anything we can do? We have to do something. This is what we do here. And absolutely, he was like, let me make a phone call, and he got the ball rolling. And I talked to my mother and asked her if she would consider being the representative plaintiff. And thankfully she did. And we're still not certified yet, and there's still a fight going on. Of course, COVID had delayed this process a bit. So I start my articles on May 15th, and I get to hit the ground running and, help working out on this file again and all the other ones. So I'm very excited.
With the last year or so, it's coming up on a year since the and I never know the right word to use, Anita. I want to just be real with you. We don't say the discovery of 215 unmarked graves.
Right. It's the recovery. We like to say. We saying recovery because
the recovery. Yeah, I appreciate that. Coming up on a year, and it's been a difficult year across the country. I think most especially for survivors, because everything is when I say unearthed, I mean metaphorically, but in some cases, who knows whether that will be literal or otherwise. And I think that's an interesting discussion about how First Nations or Indigenous communities will respond to this, and it may be on a case by case or community by community basis. But the point being, the inaugural day, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and Orange Shirt Day, more and more Canadians and Indigenous people in Canada are talking about it. There seems to be more of a national discussion. How has that impacted the motivation that you feel in your career, or perhaps the runway you see ahead of you with regards to what you intend to accomplish? Has it changed? Have you found even more conviction in the last year or so?
When news first broke of the discovery in Kamloops, we as a community were heartbroken, and even to speak about it right now breaks my heart. Those were our family, those were our ancestors, and those were children. And looking at my sons and my grandson, it still breaks our hearts, and especially with only a fraction of the schools being looked at right now, and there's still a long ways to go, and that number is going to increase and increase. And so May, when this discovery first happened, I definitely felt compelled to do something. There was this grief that people needed to get out. They needed to do something. They wanted something. So with the help of the Indigenous Law Students Association, which I was president of at the U of A, we organized a vigil at the legislature. And I think that was a really great time for everybody to come together, everyone come together in this collective grief to honor and remember. And then from there, I knew the National Truth and Reconciliation Day was, the first ever was coming up on September 30th, and Orange Shirt Day. And I'm a runner. Running has been a source of healing for me. And ultra running is, a way for me to connect with the land. And so I was like, what is a good way to raise money, keep bringing awareness, keep this conversation here, this awareness, right? So that we can't forget about it. And so I helped. I was one of the organizers. I was the director for the first ever Orange Shirt Day Run Walk on September 30th last year, and it was a sold out event. I do plan to continue doing it again this year, and that was an opportunity to really give back. We raised $10,000 to 3 different organizations, and it absolutely fueled my my passion and this fire for justice.
I want to ask you about trail running and how that came about and how that fits into the bigger picture and what's driving you. We're talking to Anita Cardinal-Stewart, JD, a recent graduate from the University of Alberta Faculty of Law and already, I mean, doing just incredible work in advocacy. Back with Anita in just a quick second. We wanted to remind you when it comes to telling stories, like she's doing right now, like we do, we connect with storytellers every single day here on the show. It's one of the reasons why we're really proud at Real Talk to be the opening night presenting sponsor of this year's Northwest Fest. It's Canada's longest running nonfiction film festival, and it returns in person May 5th through the 15th. You can check out the full schedule, the full slate of offerings, the documentaries, the full lineup at northwestfest.ca. That's also where you can buy your tickets. That includes the closing night film. That's May 14th, On the Fringe, celebrating Canada's love affair with fringe festivals. They spend a full summer on the circuit, and of course that means an extended look at Edmonton's world-renowned fringe festival as well. After the way the last 2 years have gone, what better way to close out this year's festival than a celebration of festivals? And of course, we'll see you there opening night. If you're a Patreon supporter of our show, check your email. You've already seen in that inbox an invitation for you and a guest to join us for free on opening night while tickets last. We have 40 pairs of them. And once our Patreon crew has the head start on that, if you subscribe to our Real Talk Sunday message, that's the email that goes out every Sunday. It's free, obviously. You can subscribe at the bottom of the page, ryanjesperson.com. We will open up remaining tickets to subscribers of our Real Talk Sunday message this Sunday. More details, of course, on the festival at northwestfest.ca. A shout out to our friends at Friesen Brothers. Yesterday was National Prime Rib Day. I hope that everybody had a very happy National Prime Rib Day. You know, I was at this charity hockey tournament this past weekend, Johnny. Prime rib on the Friday night.
Look at you.
Prime rib Saturday lunch, prime rib Saturday night. It was one of those kind of like, sort of a, let's call it a protein-fueled celebration.
Spoiled.
Yeah, I had a couple mixed in a couple salads after that. We're coming up on the 1st of May, which means another first of the month at Friesen Brothers. There's 16 locations across the province of Alberta. Grocery purchases $75 or more are 15% off at Friesen Brothers. Our friends at Infinity Healthcare are in the business of making perfect matches. They're in the business of consistent, trustworthy, perfect fit home care. If you have somebody in your life, a loved one, that requires more support at home because they're trying to age in place, they don't necessarily want to go into a facility. They want to stay in their home. This is where Infinity makes it possible for you to find, through their personality matching service, a fit that'll give everybody comfort and peace of mind. Plus, they're always hiring caregivers. You can learn more at infinity-8.ca. And our friends at Kubi Energy want to remind you that there are always incentives. I mean, this is the age of incentive when it comes to going green, isn't it? So you go to kubienergy.ca. You've always wanted solar. I was talking to representatives, I'll make this real quick, from the town of Raymond yesterday. You know Southern Alberta, Raymond?
Of course, yeah.
You know that they're Canada's first net zero community?
I knew this.
You did know that?
Somebody told me a few weeks ago.
I just learned this last night.
I'm moving.
Raymond, Alberta, it's solar everywhere. They got solar panels everywhere.
Yeah.
Be like Raymond. Go to Kubi. I don't know if Kubi did the job. I should be careful. But you go to kubienergy.ca, and here's the deal. You check under their blog, and under blog, you'll be able to find articles like how to tap into the Canada Greener Homes Grant. Your sustainable energy goals could be closer than you think. Our guest this morning, the remarkable Anita Cardinal-Stewart, JD, a recent graduate from the U of A's Faculty of Law. And let's talk. I love, for people on the podcast, let me describe this for you. Every single time I've said that, your face just explodes into a smile.
It really is. It's like, it's very surreal. It's going to take me a little while to get used to it, but I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely fantastic stuff. Now, you mentioned that you are the past president of the National Indigenous Law Students Association, and there have been a lot of conversations lately of the importance of representation, of how people need to see themselves, especially young kids need to see themselves represented in courtrooms and on screen and in professional sports and owning businesses, and the list goes on and on and on. What's your assessment right now of the opportunities available to and the numbers of Indigenous law students in Canada?
Right. I mean, that number is growing, but it's still very small, especially Indigenous lawyers. There's across Canada, we're a small community. I'm also the student representative on the Indigenous Bar Executive Board, and I've sat there for the last, well, this is my second year, and it really is a small community, and fostering that community is so important. And a big part of that is representation and inspiring other Indigenous university students to consider law is something I think every single one of us does our part in doing that. And I definitely want to continue that, and even going out to communities. I was also a part of a level justice program while I was at the university at the U of A Law, and that was like putting on mock trials for like high school students and things like that. And so that was another way. So to inspire and to just, and so many of those students were like, I could never be a lawyer. My grades aren't high enough, or I can't, like, but here's the thing is like, you never give up on those dreams, never give up on those goals, because you can go back, you can do all kinds of things. But I mean, really it's about resources, it's about support, and it's never a lack of talent or, it's never a lack of talent. Really what it is, it's always a lack of resources. And so that is something that we can all help to make better.
We talk about representation in the courts and Indigenous law students and the like. It's no secret to anybody that pays attention that when you take a look at the number of people incarcerated or the demographics of people incarcerated in Canada, they are disproportionately Indigenous. How does that shape your perspective or your approach to your career, both in past and moving forward?
Really, like that is, I mean, they're overrepresented, and looking back, people want to be ignorant about why that has happened. And that is a direct result because of the Indian residential school era. There are a lot of hurting people and hurting communities because of government policies and practices. And that is a result of that overrepresentation. And so having a legal representation of people that look like them is only going to help make things better. Being a part of that solution and being a part of that way to give back. And that is absolutely something that all of my peers want to be a part of and feel very passionate about.
You're saying all of your peers, you mean including non-Indigenous practitioners?
Well, I wouldn't say all my peers, but like all my Indigenous, peers. But that saying that, so many of my peers at the U of A also feel that way as well. So that was it was really great to see that. I actually had a really great time. I expected to go into law school facing a lot of racism, and there were some, mind you, but I was expecting to be fighting every day, and I did, but in other ways. And I had a really great time. It gave me a lot of opportunity to step up and to help make it a better place. And I think that's something we can all strive to do.
I hope it's okay that I'm asking this.
Yeah,
would you tell us about some of the racism that you experienced?
Oh, well, I mean, there was one instance, and it really, it was my first year. I was sitting in constitutional law class, and we were talking about some treaties and with regards to Indigenous peoples in Canada. And I was the most visibly Indigenous woman in my year, right? So everyone knows I'm First Nations. So it was difficult at times looking around and seeing no one look like me. Now, actually, in the last few years, there are more. So that's really awesome. But sitting around, and then there was somebody who had made mention, and she felt the need to talk about how Indigenous peoples have no homes. And she goes like, for people who are Chinese that come here, there's China, so they're from China, that's their home. And then she had went on to talk about like other people who have immigrated and that they have a home, but Indigenous peoples have no home. And she was very adamant about saying, they have no home. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever heard, because I'm sitting here first year law and I'm like, wow, I made it here. I do belong here. But to hear somebody talk about us and think about us in that way was extremely difficult. So I decided to, with everything, approach it with kindness and grace. I talked to, of course, the professor, and I did speak with the student as well. And a lot of that was just like disinformation. And she, really, she started to come out to events and learn. And it ended up being okay.
Huh.
So.
Thank you for sharing that. On our live chat, Carrie's watching us on YouTube right now, says, thank you for acknowledging the sterilization of the disabled. She says there are many intersections between the disability community and the Indigenous communities. Both were removed from families, sent to institutions, and sterilized, which is just what do you even say? Jillian says, never a lack of talent, always a lack of resources. 100% this. She says, this guest is fantastic. What an inspiration. Can I ask you, and we'll describe this for people, most people will listen to this on the podcast, so I'll ask you to describe, this is your official graduation photo, right? This is like your JD, this is your Doctor of Laws graduation photo. You're wearing the robes, the cap and gown, so to speak, but you have some pretty special accoutrement.
Yeah. So my aunt, and I have awesome, amazing aunts that my aunt had wanted to do something special for this, because I am the first lawyer in our family on both sides of the family. So they definitely wanted to do something that was special. So the tassels she had sent up to me, it made everything, and the tassels she had replaced with the hide from my late hukum's traditional dress. And she had also had the eagle feather that was gifted from her nation to me, and the bear claw was also belonging to my grandmother. And then she also had beaded the colors black, white, yellow, and red, which represent the 4 directions as well as the Treaty 8 colors. And that was incredibly special. My son actually is graduating grade 12 this year as well, and he wore the cap as well. There was a different one for him, but it was very emotional getting that picture done. And the photographer was like, afterwards, he said, thank you so much for this very special experience, because I never get to do anything like this. And
wow.
That just reminded me, like, this is a very special time, and especially for myself and my family, but also for my community.
People are going to see themselves in you, right? Like people.
If I can inspire one person, then that is everything to me.
Well, just think about it. Think of how many young, young women, young girls, young Indigenous girls and boys, like across the spectrum, and people from other minority or marginalized communities, people from other survivor type situations, the descendants of survivors. I mean, yesterday, Yom HaShoah, and people are talking about the Holocaust story and survivors, or rather the generation subsequent from Holocaust survivors, and the multi-generational impact there. And we're talking more about residential schools and the multi-generational impact there. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. I won't, of course, say his name, but he shared with me, I think he won't mind me sharing it here, that he's been working with a psychologist lately for the first time in a while, Anita, and the psychologist has nailed down some things in his personal life that the doctor believes that it's a result of his grandparents and ultimately his father as well, as a very young boy, surviving the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. And this guy's my age, but they're starting to dig into it. And I know he told me it's uncomfortable for him, but he didn't think that was something that was impacting his life. His mental health professional is certain that it is. I mean, these are
absolutely it is.
Yeah.
And that's intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
It's something that touches every parts of our lives. And for myself, a lot of unlearning and a lot of relearning things, or not so much relearning, but unlearning biases, unlearning things that I was taught that were wrong, to be ashamed of myself. And I started to grow that confidence again. Like, I was a young mother too. I was 17 when I had my son, my oldest son. And so those barriers also were, a huge factor in like why it's taken me so long to get to this point.
Amazing.
But yeah, so it's moving forward, acknowledging all of those barriers, all of those traumas that I know that I still have a long ways to go. But I mean, other people are experiencing that as well. And I hope they understand that you will succeed. You will, and you'll have a community behind you. And I really want to be a part of that community of support.
Well, you're a community builder too. In closing, I've already kept you way longer than we asked you for, and I know you have case files to get to. I hope. Are you missing a meeting right now because of this?
No, I'm working for my nation right now for this month before I start my articles. But,
okay. Well, I'll make this our last question for now, but you have to promise to come back. And I'd love to work with you to put together a panel, like a roundtable discussion. So we have to get you back on this because I feel like we're just getting started. But let me ask you about, you're the founder of Indigenous Runner YAG. And through this organization, that's allowed you to put on what you talked about, the Orange Shirt Day Run and Walk on National Truth and Reconciliation Day. That was September 30th. You've been raising awareness and funds, and I know that you've been doing a ton of work through that. What does, I mean, even in your Twitter bio, you're almost the very first thing in your Twitter bio is that you're a trail runner. What's the what's the thing with running? What does running do to you or for you? Why, what is it about trail running for you?
You know what? It has been a source of healing. It's been a way to honor myself as well as my community and like the land and it really is been a way to connect with other people, with other runners, other Indigenous runners who have spent their lives wanting to find an outlet, a way to heal in a way, and then like being connected to the land in that way has been that way to do that. And it has been absolutely for me. Deal with heavy things every day, especially like working in the industry that I work in and the heavy files. Like if I get overwhelmed, I have to go outside and I have to go running, and it has to be in the woods. It has to be, my feet on the ground and my heartbeat.
Fill your lungs with fresh air, feel the ground, right? Feel nature. That's incredible. I can't tell you. We took this way over time, and I sort of suspected we might. So I want to thank you for your availability. Congratulations on the Justice Abella Award. Congratulations on your Juris Doctor. Here you are, and sort of the launch of a career that has already been characterized by incredible advocacy. Thanks for being a friend of the show. Thanks for talking to us today, Anita.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
You got it. You can follow Anita. I demand that you do on Twitter at Anita Car-Stew. That's Anita Cardinal-Stewart, Doctor of Laws. What an amazing human being. I want to show you, speaking of fresh air, I want to show you a couple highlights from our time in Jasper, the off-camera time in Jasper. The show is live from out there for the past couple of days. And, we had some downtime, too, and I wanted to just share a couple photos with you, tell you a couple of stories. But first, let me remind you about Eden Landscaping. This is the time of year, like almost all the snow is gone. Is all the snow gone out of your yard, Johnny? Is everything, it's just that beautiful,
pretty good back
just
there,
the beautiful shade of brown now?
And my wife is talking about how do we spruce this up, because we just got into the new townhouse, right?
Is she saying, Johnny, how do we bring our outdoor space to life?
Exactly that.
And then you say, well, you know what, dear? If you go to landscapeedmonton.ca, you can browse the services, the portfolio that Eden Landscaping brings to the table. Family-owned, still 20 years worth of satisfied customers, return business, and, of course, referrals. Mike and his team can tell you all about how they operate. The best part about this, you don't hire a landscape architect and then hire a general contractor and then hire out trades if necessary. You're trying to save a few bucks yourself? No. It's a one-stop shop from design to completion, and they don't leave until you're completely satisfied. Eden Landscaping is at landscapeedmonton.ca. Our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park want to remind you 'tis the season for blizzards, including right now the special Very Cherry Chip Blizzard treat. There's the Oreo Dirt Pie Blizzard treat, the Cotton Candy Blizzard treat, and of course, I've not tried this one yet, but the Nestle Drumstick with Peanuts Blizzard treat. You know, the Nestle drumsticks. Those are, in my mind, one of the greatest ice cream treats out there.
Often overlooked.
It's always like when you're at a 7-Eleven in the middle of nowhere and you go to the freezer and you go, right, well, did you know it's in Blizzard form? You can pick one up today at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount. That's all Northwest Edmonton, and in Sherwood Park at Baseline Road. One of the top 5 busiest Dairy Queens in the country, by the way, that is. Baseline Road. Hey, while you're out in Sherwood Park at the Baseline Road Dairy Queen, pop into Sherwood Dodge. You can check out the 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee, a total redesign, the new front grille, the new headlights. I love how it looks. And, of course, they have the big Grand Wagoneer as well. This is Jeep's re-entry into the luxury class, competing with the Escalades and the Navigators and all those big rigs that families are using out on the road. The Jeep Wagoneer available today at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. Did you happen to see my Instagram story yesterday? Did you see my close encounter with wildlife?
And I was like, he's getting close to nature. He's involving himself in the whole. Because I thought you'd be too busy up there. You wouldn't get out.
Well, no, I had to. I just wanted to go clear my head and go for a little walk around the property of the Jasper Park Lodge. So if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen this already. Let's roll.
Take a
look at this little fella who kind of snuck up on me.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy. Gave him a little greeting. He's like 6. He snuck up on me. I was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden I heard, you can hear the teeth like chomping on the grass, and there's this. I can tell. I didn't take a look at the back end. I don't know if it was a mule deer, a whitetail. I think it's probably a whitetail. But that was actually the only deer I saw on the property. Elk everywhere.
Yeah.
Like we were talking to Talon Sweeney, the director of golf there at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. And, of course, so Talon was saying, well, did you see the elk? They are everywhere in Jasper right now, all over the place. And then, of course, all the other wildlife that comes with it. But just a beautiful, beautiful time out in Jasper. Marmot Basin still open until May 1st. They're open until this weekend. Went for a rip there, bud. Just got out for a couple of hours, but the conditions were incredible.
This looks dreamy.
Usually when you're snowboarding, skiing, everybody knows like spring skiing, you know, when you're out there at like, you know, the end of April into the beginning of May, you're expecting, you know, you ride on your rock board, right? You expect to have it all banged up and get your wax all messed up and blow out your edges. Still a ton of snow out at Marmot. As a matter of fact, it was snowing on the drive up to the mountain.
Amazing. It snowed here yesterday, too.
Oh, did it?
And that's great to hear. But tell me about the food.
No,
What'd you eat? I know you. You had a...
Well, I had to pop into the Jasper Brew Pub before I left.
Of course.
And I don't ever even look. I walk in and they say, would you like a paper copy of the menu, or are you okay with the QR code? And I said, I don't need the menu. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I know which beer I'm going to go with from Jasper Brewing, and I'm going to go with the elk meatloaf.
Oh.
And that is like their, I don't know if it's technically award winning, but if I were handing out culinary awards in Jasper, so look at this. If you're watching this on YouTube, look at this. Are you kidding me? There's sauteed mushrooms on top and the greenery. And they've you know what they do is they have like the yam and the mashed potato combo.
I love that. The mixture.
Mixture. It's like, if you picture it how they played it, it's like the yin and the yang.
Yeah. Sweetens up the mix. Yeah.
It does, pal. So just an amazing time out there. And thanks to our friends at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge and at Tourism Jasper for making that happen. And, of course, our friends at 13 Ways, Doug Griffiths, former Alberta Minister of Municipal Affairs, Heather Thompson, and the team at 13 Ways for putting together that amazing community leaders camp. Coming up on tomorrow's show, it's Friday. That means we have our weekly date with our good friend Supriya Dwivedi. We got a lot to get into. Things happen over the course of 7 days when it comes to federal politics. I want to ask her about this convoy that's making its way to Ottawa again for this weekend, and Conservative leadership candidate Jean Charest, a one-on-one in lieu of a Real Talk roundtable. That's coming up tomorrow. We hope to see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, technical producer John Hicks, managing director Josh Dunford, account coordinator Lawrence Sterlego, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.